Hello? Ah, yes. Okay. Yeah. Good afternoon. Can I ask the panelists, please, to join on the stage? So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nadine Valat. I'm the coordinator of the FAO Green Climate Fund Partnership in FAO, in the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. I'm taking the floor on behalf of Mrs. Maria Elena Semedo, Deputy Director General, who unfortunately is still in another high-level event and will join us a little bit later. But because everybody is running to all the other interesting events we have, I thought it was better to start. So I would like, first of all, to express my full appreciation for having all of you at this event, you, the audience, and you, panelists, who have accepted to share your experience regarding unlocking climate finance for agri-food systems transformation. And we have, I'm sure you have heard at many other meetings during these past days and during coming days, the importance of agri-food systems transformation to adapt to climate change. Agriculture emits around 1/4 of all greenhouse gas emissions, and I'm sure that's also a statement that we are all aware of. But there is a good news, which is that agriculture is also one of the solutions and one of the very powerful solutions to climate challenges. Our speakers who are here with us today will walk us through the ways that they are working with FAO and other partners in the public and private sector to scale up investments in the agriculture and forestry sector for better production, better nutrition, better environment, and better life, leaving no one behind. I'm also asking them to shed light on the opportunities for partnerships and collaborations that lie ahead on the path towards a carbon neutral and nature positive future. Partnerships are key for accelerating countries' access to climate finance, and which is why I'm also pleased to have here a representative of the Côte d'Ivoire Ministry for Environment and Sustainable Development, who will talk to us about how Côte d'Ivoire is being impacted by climate change and the solution that is being put in place thanks to global partnership and cooperation, including partnership with the Green Climate Fund and FAO. Côte d'Ivoire serves as a prime example of the possibility that we can generate when we build partnership across all sectors, public, private, at country level, between agriculture and environment as well, to create sustainable value chains. The government of Côte d'Ivoire is working with FAO, with the Global Environment Facility, the Green Climate Fund, and we have representatives here, and private sector to unlock climate finance. The project that was approved by the Green Climate Fund for zero deforestation cocoa value chain is the first FAO GCF project that mobilized co-financing from another FAO GEF project, as well as mobilizing private sector engagements towards climate action. It is a pioneering example, and we are very, very pleased to have you here, Mr. Georges Quadjet, to speak on this experience. Our speakers from the Green Climate Fund and from the GEF will tell us more about how partnership can drive us forward in the 2030 agenda by accelerating countries' access to climate finance for investments in sustainable, green, and climate-resilient agriculture. We have also, and very happy to have speakers from the World Cocoa Foundation, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and Thailand's Ministry of Agriculture. They will broaden our understanding on the role partnerships play in bringing the public and private sector together to make value chains more inclusive and more sustainable. Excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends, I would like now to give the floor to Mr. Georges Quadjet, who is a principal technical advisor to the Minister of Côte d'Ivoire, to share his experience. Over to you.
merci à Madame la modératrice. Le ministre de l'Environnement et du Développement durable aurait bien voulu être là. Il vient de participer à un premier panel concernant la même thématique. Et son agenda l'a obligé à ne pas être là. Et il m'a désigné de le représenter. Il faut dire que ça fait plus d'une quinzaine d'années que je travaille au ministère de l'Environnement et du Développement durable. Et ces questions liées au changement climatique, après l'accord de Paris, la Côte d'Ivoire a pris de sérieux engagements pour changer la manière d'adresser la question climatique. Alors, le premier élément qu'il faut noter, c'est qu'on a pu établir dans le cadre institutionnel et réglementaire un nouveau code forestier en 2019. Et ce code forestier fait la promotion de l'agroforesterie. Et il faut dire que le cacao a pénétré les forêts classées et la solution que nous avons trouvée pour pouvoir rendre notre cacao durable, c'est de faire cohabiter la production cacaoyère avec la forêt. Et l'ambition, c'est une agriculture zéro déforestation, avec en prime favoriser l'agroforesterie. Et ça a déjà commencé. On a des exemples d'agroforesterie qui ont réussi en Côte d'Ivoire, et il s'agit maintenant de passer à l'échelle. Et c'est le lieu, elle a parlé tout à l'heure, de notre premier projet Fonds vert avec la FAO, qui est un projet qui s'intéresse beaucoup plus à une manière de faire le cacao, que ce soit dans le domaine rural ou dans le domaine des forêts classées, c'est de le faire en sorte à ce que les communautés puissent bénéficier des rendements d'un cacao qui prennent en compte leurs efforts dans la production du cacao. Et dans ce sens, la Côte d'Ivoire multiplie le partenariat public-privé. De plus en plus, par exemple dans les forêts classées, qu'on a dit de catégorie 3, qui ont de grandes superficies qui sont très dégradées, on signe des partenariats avec le secteur privé de sorte à reboiser ces forêts. Il faut dire aussi que dans notre CDN, les contributions nationales déterminées, l'ambition de la Côte d'Ivoire, c'est d'ici 2030 d'arriver à récupérer 20% de son couvert forestier. Et cela s'inscrit dans une dynamique et tout va, où avec les bailleurs, nous avons déjà défini un plan d'action. Et pour exemple, à la COP 15 sur la désertification, la Côte d'Ivoire a lancé le Legacy Programme. C'est un programme qui vise à prendre en compte tous les facteurs qui contribuent à la déforestation. De sorte, et c'est estimé à peu près à 1 milliard d'euros. Et il y a certains bailleurs qui se sont déjà engagés aux côtés de la Côte d'Ivoire, notamment le secteur privé, avec le ministère de la SODEFOR, le ministère de l'Environnement, à faire en sorte que les producteurs qui participent à la chaîne de valeur de la production du cacao puissent bénéficier, vraiment dans cette agriculture nouvelle, des bienfaits de leur production. Un autre exemple que nous pouvons citer, c'est le projet Scolure, avec la FAO, qui nous aide à faire une meilleure utilisation de nos terres, mais en valorisant à chaque étape de la chaîne de valeur tous les éléments qui interviennent, de sorte que l'empreinte écologique sur ces terres-là soit pratiquement, je dirais, tend vers une réduction efficace des émissions de gaz à effet de serre. Alors, un autre élément, ça c'est avec l'apport du FEM et du GEF, pour m'intéresser à notre ami. Aujourd'hui, on travaille sur la phase 2 du programme d'investissement forestier qui a été adopté, qui va dans un montant de 100 millions de dollars, ce qui est peu, mais déjà important pour pouvoir initier le reboisement. Ça, c'était un élément extrêmement important. Et autour de la forêt du parc national de Taï, qui est l'un des plus grands parcs au monde, la protection de ce parc contribue aussi à une réduction importante des émissions de gaz à effet de serre. Et autour de ce parc, toutes les communautés qui sont intégrées dans la préservation de ce parc-là bénéficient des activités génératrices de revenus. On fait de l'élevage, on fait du planting d'arbres comestibles, c'est-à-dire ça leur donne des revenus additionnels. Et c'est ce champ que, depuis quelques années, la Côte d'Ivoire s'est inscrite dans cette dynamique. Et ce qu'il faut dire pour terminer, c'est que dans le CDN révisé, la Côte d'Ivoire est l'un des 24 pays à avoir révisé son CDN pour la COP 27. Et il faut dire que l'ambition dans ce CDN est très claire en matière de foresterie. C'est que le diagnostic qui a été fait montre que si nous voulons y arriver, on a deux piliers essentiels. Dans le Côte, ce qu'il faut relever, au-delà de l'agroforesterie, aujourd'hui en Côte d'Ivoire, celui qui est bénéficiaire d'une parcelle, il est propriétaire de l'arbre. Ce qui n'était pas le cas avant. C'est-à-dire que si vous avez une parcelle, vous avez le titre foncier de cette parcelle, l'arbre qui est planté à l'intérieur, c'est vous qui en êtes le propriétaire. Ça, c'est une innovation majeure. Et ensuite, avec la Banque mondiale, nous avons lancé un autre programme, le programme de réduction des émissions. C'est vrai que le marché carbone est un marché fluctuant, mais nous avons pu quand même établir un gentleman agreement de sorte à pouvoir payer des services environnementaux liés à la reforestation de notre pays. Je vous remercie de votre aimable attention.
Thank you very much. That was really very important, and you have, in fact, also in the previous meetings, Minister mentioned a lot of the efforts from Côte d'Ivoire, which are very impressive. I would like now to give the floor to our panelists, starting with Mohamed Khalil. Sorry if I don't pronounce your name very well, Board Affairs Manager at the Green Climate Fund. So Mohamed, as the largest global fund dedicated to help fight climate change, so GCF works with several partners to catalyze investments in key sectors as countries transition towards low-emission, climate-resilient pathways. Can you tell us how does GCF accelerate access to climate finance through public and private partnership? And what partnerships does the GCF hope to strengthen to help the most vulnerable countries raise their climate ambition? Thank you, Mohamed.
Yeah, thank you, Nadine, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the invitation. I'm really honored to be among this distinguished panel, and I would like to commend le Côte d'Ivoire for all their dedication and commitment really to sustainable agriculture and reducing the carbon footprint of the agriculture system. So with regard to the question that you addressed, the Green Climate Fund focus on three main areas to accelerate and build partnership in the field of agro-system transformation. The first one is we focus on programming, so programming climate finance as soon as it is committed by donors. The second area is the partnership organization, by working with a network of over 100 accredited entities, both public and private, international, regional, and national. And the third area is the scaling up of partnership by building on successful climate adaptation and mitigation pilots and programs. So these are the three areas that we focus on in order to accelerate and strengthen partnership: programming, organization of partnership, and acceleration and scaling up of partnership. To give an example, I'll use the example from Côte d'Ivoire, as we just listened to the presentation. Indeed, in the project SAP 015, about promoting zero deforestation for the cacao production for reduction emission in Côte d'Ivoire, which is called PROMIR. It's developed in partnership between the GCF and the FAO. It's an excellent example of the scaling up and the partnering. The project tackles the critical issue of deforestation driven by commodity production, which in this case is the cacao. And Côte d'Ivoire has experienced one of the world's fastest rate of deforestation and forest degradation. Agriculture contributes to 62% of deforestation in Côte d'Ivoire, and 38% of which is driven by cacao production. So this shows really the magnitude of the problem. In response, the project will implement zero deforestation agroforestry models in 3 southern regions of Côte d'Ivoire to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by decoupling deforestation from cacao production. So PROMIR is scaling up a previous pilot project that successfully promoted agroforestry schemes and implemented by AFD, one of the GCF accredited entities, and will develop institutional capacities to implement RED+. In alignment with the support the GCF has provided to RED+ process. The project as well is co-financed by the GEF and through FAO, which is in line with our increased efforts to join programming with the other climate funds. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. And you raised some very important points. And I would like to say that from an FAO perspective, certainly the partnership with GCF has been a major accelerator for us to work more broadly in partnership with others, public and private. So I think that has been a major change in our way of working. And that's really very welcome. And we can already see how this increased partnership enable increase the impact and have really a real benefit at a country level. So thank you, Mohamed. Esteban, you represent the Global Environment Facility, and earlier this year, the GEF approved 2 very important strategies for the next 4 years. The GEF 8 programming directions and the LDCF SECF strategy. I will leave it to you to explain to us what these acronyms means. There are a few entry points for agri-food systems, including the Food Systems Integrated Program are following the climate change mitigation strategy and the central LDCF themes of agriculture, food security and health. In your view, Esteban, what are the key transformations in agri-food systems that would help countries and the GEF achieve its objectives? And how can the GEF and the GCF improve and increase their coordination to help countries achieve and scale up impact of their climate finance, including in the private sector, including the private sector? So we would like you to expand more from the GEF perspective on what just Mohamed has just shared with us. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you very much to FAO for the invitation. I'm very happy to be among friends. First of all, I think we are all aware of the challenge that we have, right? We have an increasing population, up to 9.8 billion by 2050. We have, it's like it's never ending, right? We had COVID-19, which hasn't ended. Now we have the war in Ukraine. So all of these things stress the food security and make this challenge more difficult. So definitely business as usual doesn't work and is doomed to failure, which is why we need transformation of the entire value chain, from production, processing, distribution, and even consumption. So for us at the GEF, this is in the core of our mandate, and perhaps the several acronyms that you described, for the ones that don't know it, the GEF works in 4-year replenishment cycles. The current one initiated in July this year and will be up to June 2026. So during the preparation of this replenishment, which is called Jeff 8, our 8 replenishment, we thought, how can we embrace all these different challenges within our mandates? We don't only work in climate change, we work in other focal areas like biodiversity, land degradation, and so on. So we thought of, and perhaps you cannot see it, a healthy planet and healthy people. So it embraces the work that we are doing and also the challenge that we have ahead. So thinking of the panel that we have today, it's also a healthy agri-food system, what we need. So in our previous replenishment during Jeff 7, we launched an impact program, which means that it's cross-cutting among the different focal areas where the Jeff works. And it was called the Food Systems Land Use and Restoration Program. And it was a program with a contribution from the Jeff of almost $340 million. It's the largest program financed by the Jeff so far, with a participation of 27 countries. And it has focused on different commodities like cocoa, corn, coffee, palm oil, rice, soy, and so on. And this has been a great experience for us. And building on this experience, during our current replenishment, we launched a new integrated program, also cross-cutting, which is called the Food Systems Integrated Program, with a budget of $227 million. So we hope to provide support to more countries, and it will address the livestock and aquaculture sectors. So this is, I would say, one of the ways in which the Jeff has been providing support. Also, through standalone projects, we have been financing projects related to agriculture through our land degradation focal area, but also through the LDCF, that is the Least Developed Country Fund, which is also operated by the Jeff. And there, one of the themes, it's also related to agriculture, food security, and health. So with these different entry points, what we're looking is for scale-up. Jeff is mainly grants. We also have non-grant instruments, but countries have predictability of support. Countries know in advance how much is the contribution from the Jeff, and then they can decide how to invest these resources. So in this regard, we can be at the pre-investment stage and mobilize resources. For example, for the integrated program that I mentioned from our previous replenishment, we were able to mobilize more than $3 billion additional to the contribution from the Jeff. So this is the type of projects that we're trying to get together. And of course, from your question, these contributions comes from the governments, but also from the private sector, from ongoing partnerships, and from development partners like the GCF. More specifically with the GCF, we have good examples in Côte d'Ivoire, and thank you so much for the explanation. And I think we have several other examples where we have sat down and tried to determine how we can benefit each other. Again, we are mostly focused at the pre-investment stage, so we are a great complement if we work together. And also we have a long-term vision, or LTV, on complementary coherence and collaboration, which was launched in Glasgow. So it's a means in which the Jeff and the GCF have been sitting down and together, the technical teams. The last meeting was in November, just before the COP. We sat down in our offices in DC, the different technical teams, and see, okay, this is our portfolio, this is yours, this is how we work, or also to try to understand how both of us can work together. And we have an agenda for the next year and for the projects that are ongoing. So we feel that the challenge is quite significant, and you put it very well, that we have to define this type of collaboration so we can create a better impact. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Esteban. And yes, I think that countries and partners of the GEF and GCF are really looking forward to see how there could be increased complementarity and coherence, and how the GCF could be scaling up many of the initial investments that are being done in the framework of GEF. And we have some interesting examples we can share maybe afterwards. So now, very happy to have with us a representative of the private sector with us today, Ethan Budiansky. Ethan, you are the Director of Environment of the World Cocoa Foundation. 5 years ago, at COP23 in Bonn, the leading cocoa and chocolate companies joined a commitment with the governments of Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana to work together to tackle deforestation and restore forests. Ethan, we are very interested to hear more from you of what have been the achievements of this collaboration, and in your view, what is needed to drive more success in the future? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the invitation to be here today with you. So if you don't know the World Cocoa Foundation, we have a membership base of over 100 leading cocoa and chocolate companies around the world. And with them, we engage with producing, consuming governments, NGOs, CSOs, donor community, and other key partners to drive sustainability in the cocoa sector, in which climate change and deforestation are two of them. So as Nadine was saying, 5 years ago, we launched the Cocoa and Forest Initiative at COP23 in Bonn, a collaboration between the governments of Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire and 36 leading cocoa and chocolate companies right behind me to work together to eliminate deforestation, forest degradation, and restore degraded forests in the cocoa sector. And we've since expanded over to Colombia as well. This is an unprecedented initiative, an initiative that's driving transformation in the cocoa sector towards environmental sustainability, driving accountability, transparency, better collaboration across the companies, companies with government, with other key stakeholders, collective action, data sharing, I'll talk about that in a second, as well as aligning on best practices and quality monitoring and evaluation. And we've seen significant progress since the launch of CFI. As Mr. Kwadjo talked about a few minutes ago, the governments have adopted new forest policies for the promotion of conservation and protection of forests, the promotion of restoration and reforestation, and cocoa agroforestry. There's also been a lot of progress in both Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire to establish national traceability systems all the way down to the farm level, as well as adopting satellite monitoring platforms to be able to proactively address new deforestation. The companies have also made significant investments as part of their CFI commitments, particularly around traceability, as well as the promotion of cocoa agroforestry, distributing over 23 million trees over the past 5 years, as well as continued efforts and support to farmers to improve farm-level productivity with a focus on climate-smart cocoa. And this past year, we formed a very cool new partnership with the World Resources Institute, the development of the West Africa Cocoa Farm data set. 19 cocoa and chocolate companies shared with us, with WRI, their supply chain information in over 850,000 polygons of their supply chain to allow us to better prioritize and build collaboration across companies and with other key stakeholders around key forest landscapes. This data set will also help to support national level traceability as well as deforestation monitoring. Now, there is a strong commitment for the continued and future success of the Cocoa and Forest Initiative. But we also recognize that if we really want to be successful, we're going to have to accelerate and scale impact on the ground. And the way that we're going to do that is a number of different ways. First off, scaling science-based best practices that are farmer-focused. Aligning national and company commitments towards 1.5, towards reducing emissions, particularly around the SBT and the GHG protocol, all in an effort to catalyze greater private sector investment towards climate change and deforestation. Geographic expansion, looking at how we can expand CFI into other priority geographic areas, particularly those that are more biodiverse. And then what's most relevant for the conversation today, and what's kind of key to our future success and the strategy going forward, is building stronger public-private collaborations in priority forest landscapes, with a focus on pre-competitive collaboration around forest conservation and forest restoration. And the FAO Premier project is a prime example of doing exactly that, in which we're working together to promote a zero deforestation landscape, as well as promoting zero deforestation cocoa, providing direct support to farmers on productivity, the promotion of cocoa agroforestry, farm level diversification, and reforestation. So looking forward, we're focused on building stronger partnerships in priority forest landscapes, not just the government, not just the private sector, but the international community. Leveraging the international community and climate finance to catalyze stronger collaboration and investment from the private and the public sector in forest restoration and conservation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Ethan. And I'll be very pragmatic and practical. You were speaking about chocolate, and zero deforestation chocolate. So we distributed some chocolate, and there will be some for the panelists at the end. Now we have the pleasure to have another representative of the private sector. So just to illustrate what we started with in saying how important the partnerships across sectors is so important, we have Tony Ciantonas, Director of the Scaling Positive Agriculture and member of the Extended Leadership Group in the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Tony, we know, sorry, I have a question for you. We know that we can't achieve sustainable agri-food systems without working with the private sector. The World Business Council of Sustainable Development has done an incredible amount of work to create more nature-friendly and climate-resilient commodity chains, often in partnership with public financing to create more impact for each dollar invested. So could you tell us about some of the most exciting initiatives that the World Business Council for Sustainable Development is working on? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And I'm sorry that I don't have chocolate, because Ethan wins because he can give chocolate out. And I'm going to give some examples on rice and soy, which isn't as tasty for you today. But please bear with me. So thank you for the introduction. I'm just going to build on what some of the other panelists have said, especially Ethan, because I think the work of the World Cocoa Foundation is such a good example of how that's being done for cocoa, and especially with a focus on areas like West Africa. Why is this a problem for the companies that WBCSD works with? So we work with about 220 international companies from across the world. In the Food and Agriculture program, about 70 of them across the whole food and agriculture value chain, and that includes banks. And if I focused on these two groups, why they come to us and just say, we need help, it's kind of two categories, and it's in the real economy companies along the value chain, from the input companies, the companies who take off produce that's produced in areas like West Africa or Southeast Asia, or wherever the big agri-commodity areas are, to the downstream companies who are processing that into food. They are all desperate to implement their Scope 3 climate change targets and build resilience into their value chains. They've all made public commitments, their CEOs have made them. They've made them under the Science Based Targets Initiative primarily. And they are struggling to work out how, if 80 to 90% of their biggest footprint on climate change sits at the production side, how they're actually going to make that happen in reality. So they come to us to just say, we really need help to implement things on the ground. We need to take collective action. One single company cannot do that alone. It has to work with many others pre-competitively, as Ethan knows so well. And so they come to us to say, help us identify projects that aren't just small pilots, but things that we can start collaborating around landscapes and scaling up. The second group that come to us with big challenges are many of the finance sector companies now. So we're working with a lot of the private sector banks increasingly, who equally have made commitments to climate change in terms of their own portfolios of billions of dollars that they lend out. And we know at the moment that that money, there's huge amounts of work's going on, platforms that the United Nations Environment Programme has, its Net Zero Banking Alliance. There's 100 banks who are committing to achieving net zero. They have to do that in food and agriculture. It's an incredibly complex place to be, and they're just getting their heads around the guidance of what that would entail. But ultimately, it's the same question. It's that we really struggle to work out how this global level commitment can be translated to action on the ground that's actually going to get us to a 1.5 degree target. So that's the big problem. They don't have the technical help, they need the guidance, they need the standards, and they come to us to talk about it. Some of the work that we've been doing to try and actually realize this on the ground has been partnership based. So it's bringing partners together around things like sustainable rice cultivation. So super excited that I have a colleague from the Global Environment Facility here today, and also the Green Climate Fund, and also representative from Southeast Asia. Because on sustainable rice, that was one area where we said this was a commodity that we believed could have real value in terms of its huge footprint, both in terms of the numbers of smallholders producing it, but the emissions that come from it. And many companies that are involved in processing rice, trading rice, and selling rice. And the idea there was saying, well, how could we mobilize more finance into sustainable rice cultivation? We brought together a whole set of partners under the Sustainable Rice Landscapes Initiative. It was FAO, UNEP, the International Rice Research Institute, Sustainable Rice Platform, and the German GIZ, German Development Implementer, to say how can we mobilize money from GEF7 to try and implement that to the ground. And the private sector was a critical part of that, because the private sector was saying, well, what we can do is we can help provide some of the innovations in the production practices, and we can provide some of the offtake that could provide a sustainable source, if you like, of demand for that rice. It's still a tricky commodity to work on, but what we've just committed to and got money for is a blended finance facility that can be set up to help make that happen between public and private sector. We're working on that with FAO and some others. So these sorts of collaborations are happening, but we know they need to happen a lot quicker. I'll give one quick one on soy in Brazil. A lot of the agri-commodity traders are under big pressure to put commitments in place and meet commitments on zero deforestation, zero land conversion within the Cerrado area of Brazil. And similar processes are going on there to say, how do we set up these landscape projects collectively to make that happen? Initially, it's a private sector effort, but what we've been saying again and again and again is that you need to bring in the public sector, you need to bring in local finance vehicles to make that happen. Last one is more global, and then I'll stop and shut up, as we say in English. But it's the Good Food Finance Network. So for any of you that were involved in the Food Systems Summit last year, many of you probably were. Many of you probably have your own views on how successful the discussions were that came out of that. But one of the groups was around finance and mobilizing finance for food systems transformation more broadly. We've helped establish, along with UNEP and the EAT Foundation and others, the Good Food Finance Network, which is trying to bring together, again, public and private participants to identify what are the big targets of mobilizing finance towards food systems transformation, what are some of the innovations we need to be better at doing on the ground, and how can we take that forward. So that's been work that's been going on for around the last 12 months to move it ahead. I think the last point I'd make is that there's so much more to do. There's so much more money that needs to be funded and funneled and financed. But you know, these transaction costs are high, and we have to use what we've already got out there, and that's what we've been saying. There's so much work. Let's not duplicate. Let's try and partner and synergize on the funds that we already have. Setting up some of these funds costs millions of dollars just in the first place to get them moving. We have to use what we've got out there already. We have to make it better. We have to bring these partnerships to the table to help it work better. Thanks.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you also for broadening, because we have been focusing a lot on cocoa. So it was really nice to hear as examples Brazil, soya, and rice, which makes a very nice transition with Margaret Yuvatana, Director of International Agricultural Affairs Group of the Planning and Technical Division in the Department of Agriculture of Thailand. And Margaret, I would like you to share with us, or to tell us, how countries in Southeast Asia are forging partnerships to accelerate access to climate finance for projects that promote climate resilient and low emission agriculture. So we had Tony speak about the rice landscape initiative. I'm sure you have other examples, so you can expand on the landscape initiative. So over to you, Margaret. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very nice introduction. I think you already said some of my speech already. So good afternoon, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed an honor for me to be speaking with the high-level panels here, and speaking in front of an audience who looks very, very eager to listen to me. Although it is a challenge for me to be speaking always at the last. But anyway, so most of my thoughts are already spoken. I always enjoy reading the title forum when I am invited to speak. The one in Bonn last June, the Do or Die for Coronivia. And that's a very good title. Now, the title here is Unlocking Climate Finance for Agri-Food System Transformation. So I am thinking, who locked it? Yeah? Who locked, and for how long now it's locked? Yeah? And so today we are supposed to talk how we open it, right? To name a few, I think you know him, Bo Damon, Sujita Dasgupta, who is unfortunately not here, and Imelda Dada Bakudo here, who is here right now, who could give you the details on the process from the development of proposal, coordination, submission, until approval of the project. But before I would give some oh my God, I will be full before I finish my talk. But before I would give some part of my time, I would like to make a statement that the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, is an important platform or mechanism for the ASEAN member states, stands united in the implementation and scaling up of initiatives to promote green and climate resilient agri-food systems. Every ASEAN member states aligns themselves to a regional priorities through partnerships and collaborations, be it multilateral, bilateral, or with relevant international organizations. As among the top priorities of the ASEAN member states includes the 4 betters: better production, better nutrition, better environment, and better life. And to be more inclusive, that no one left behind. And to implement these initiatives, we need to have an enabling policy environment, partners, cooperation from all stakeholders involved, and of course, financial mechanism institutions such as Green Climate Fund and Global Environment Facility to scale up climate finance for high-impact projects that promote green and climate-resilient agri-food system. However, the implementation on the ground is still a big challenge, and we need to coordinate with the national designated authorities yet on how best we could utilize the funding effectively and ensuring that it reaches the target beneficiaries of these funds to incentivize these actions. For the last 2 minutes, 1 minute, okay, Dada, please, can you give some of your views? What have you done with the GC?
I think we just wanted to actually introduce that it's a multi-country readiness program, that we have access from the 6 countries of Southeast Asia: Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, Philippines, and I'm missing somebody else. And it's indeed to show the priorities identified in the negotiation for the shaping of the Coronivia joint work on agriculture. And we are very happy to get the grant this year, and we hope to attract investments that will open up larger climate finance for the transformation of agri-food system in our region. So that's really just about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Dada. Sorry to have cut you short, but we're getting really to the end of the session, and I would like to leave a few minutes if there were any questions. I see one question here. We need the mic.
Hi, thank you. My name is Carolina Toapanta. I represent Bomaco Foundation and local governments of Manabí province at coastal Ecuador. I was wondering if Ecuador is part of your programs, as we manage a lot of cacao and also rice. We are starting to help producers there in terms of sustainable rice with docks. Very interesting programs. I was asking myself the same question as you did, how we unlock those funds, especially for a country as Ecuador, where we need a letter of authorization from the Ecuadorian government to participate as local governments for the GEF funds. So we need, that's where the information we got, that to apply to those funds, local governments, not national government, but local governments, we need a letter from the national government to apply to the funds. That will put a strong limit because in terms of politics, local governments could be different line than the national government. So then the letter will never come from the national government, the letter of authorization, so we can apply as local government. I belong to an NGO, but I am helping local governments to trying to reach to these funds. Something that is very hard, especially in the coastal Ecuador, where we have very few forests left. And the majority of the population of Ecuador lives in the coast and depends on those forests for water and for their income. They live from cacao, they live from agroforestry plots, but it's so hard to get to those funds, especially for local governments where we have very few capacities on trying to attract these funds. So I don't know if you can give us a hint on how we can get that. Thank you.
Before we answer, is there any other question from the floor? Maybe we can take another question.
My name is Nghia. I'm from Vietnam. I want to echo to my colleagues from Thailand to ask the panelists the question of who keep the key to unlock. Because with the developing countries, this is a very, I think, critical question. Whether it's coming from the private sectors or from the ideas. Because we have here the financial institution, you have the GCF, we have the GEF, and we have the private sectors. For Vietnam, according to the World Banks, about 50% of total money needed for the climate response to climate change we expect to come from the private sectors. So I think I'm very interested in echo to my colleague's question of who keep the key and what kind of lock it is. Because if the very intelligent lock, we need to have the biological key to open it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other question? If not, I would like to maybe ask Ethan and Tony to answer Ecuador on support to coffee in Ecuador, because there was a specific question on that. Quick answer on local government. And before we conclude, maybe all panelists could, in 30 seconds, give their views on how to unlock, how to find the right key to open the door. So maybe Tony, Ethan, on coffee and cocoa in Ecuador. Jeff, on local government very quickly, and then each of you 30 seconds. How can we find the key, the same key to open the door and unlock finance? Thank you.
It's a very good question, and my response, it's a very easy answer for me, because if you look at our name, we are the World Cocoa Foundation. That means that our vision, our mission is to promote cocoa sustainability around the world. We are currently looking at those areas, those regions, those geographies where we can bring a value added, where we can help to build those partnerships around core sustainability issues. And I'll tell you that Ecuador is one of those that we are currently exploring. So more to come. Hopefully that there are partnerships to be built in the future.
I'll also give my 30 seconds thing at the same time, but I think it's just fantastically hard to try and work this out, a bit like the biological key that you were talking about. There isn't enough finance and investment going into our sector more broadly. I was on the a press conference for the Good Food Finance Network yesterday, and Susan, the Deputy Director of UNEP, was saying about the massive gap in finance for the food and agriculture sector compared to other sectors like energy, and also talking about how much more private sector money came from areas like renewables compared to our sector. So I think there's a lot more to do. I think de-risking is a big part of that, because it's such a risky sector to... I'm a farmer, I run a farm, and I know how risky it is if you get it wrong because of the business, and with high input costs and high energy costs. So anyway, I hope we can talk more about it. My 30 seconds at the end is that the one thing we didn't really talk about much today is realigning public subsidies. And I think that at the moment, one of the big questions is how do we align subsidies that support agriculture right now towards some of the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. And if we could do that, that's unlocking a huge amount of finance, much bigger, in fact, than what's currently provided by the private sector. So I think we need to have a really active government policy level discussion and regulatory level about that. And I think that's an important need. I'll hand it over.
Thank you, and I would add also to get rid of perverse incentives as well. So to your question, the Jeff works with operational focal points. If you Google Jeff focal points, you will find the person. I think we had the conversation yesterday, and this is the way in which the Jeff has been structured. But any project that is financed by the Jeff, civil society engagement is primary. Usually people think that projects are built on a top-down approach, right? It's the government making the proposal with the agencies. But in my previous life before Jeff, I was working in project development and execution, and I did it from civil society. My last COP before this one was COP 17. I had a huge Excel for the coffee sector in Costa Rica. I was invited by the government, and it turned out into a NAMA for the coffee sector. And I was just a young student working in the university. So I think it's that reach out to this person. As I mentioned, there are fresh resources from Jeff 8. Ecuador, if you look also at the Jeff, STAR is the equation in which we calculate the allocation for each country. Ecuador has almost $40 million that can be used in grants, but also connecting to what Tony said, can be used to de-risk investments from the private sector. So I guess connecting to my 30 minutes is strong emphasis on collaboration and also the importance of all the actors that are here. Governments will not be able to solve this only. It's all the actors, and we hope from the Jeff that we make our contribution so we can scale it up. And actually, I don't think it's finding the key, it's creating the key so we can solve this problem.
Yeah, I'll try to make it as quick as possible. Thanks, Nadine. My answer to your question, what we can do to unlock two things. First of all, partnerships, to design the right partnerships. This is very important and essential. And secondly, to come up with the right combination of instruments, including blended finance and innovative restructuring to de-risk and catalyze public and private finance at scale.
I have 10 seconds, right? So, 2 words. Policy and partnership, okay? So, if your government have a policy, either it's national or regional, then you can develop a good project to be submitted to GCF and GEF. And that project should reflect the priorities of the local people, of the farmers, because we put the farmers as the center, as the leader of development. We take their views on what are their priorities, we put it in a nice project, and then we submit it to GCF. So those we need champions here. We need dedicated workers who would really develop a very nice project. It's a long process, I tell you. We got the grant on GCF after 2 years. After 3 years, no? 3 years. So, and we are proud to say it's the very first multi-country proposal for GCF. And so that would be now, the other regions are now looking at us and trying to be that as a prototype, as a pilot, or as a example for them. So the key here is enabling policy to drive these champions to work better, but effectively. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Margaret. So thank you very much to all of you. Before you leave, Mrs. Semedo, Deputy Director General of FAO, has joined us and will give us some closing remarks and additional insights on how to unlock.
Thank you, Nadine, and good afternoon to all. I'm sorry, I need to change role with Nadine. I was in another meeting with the Minister of Health, and I couldn't leave, but I could follow some of your discussion. I could see how exciting it was, the discussion here today. Today has been the Agriculture Day in COP27. I attended the launch of 3 initiatives. FAST on agriculture, ICANN on nutrition, and one on a better life. All of the discussion came on the need to have appropriate financing resources, meaning that we are talking about a sector. It's true, we all recognize that it contributes to greenhouse emissions, but we all know that it has the solution also to decarbonize the economy. Why we are receiving so low financing? We have different figures, but as you said, compare what goes to energy and other sectors is small amount. And when we go to the smallholder farmers, they produce more than 30% of the food we consume. They receive 1.5% of the financing going to climate. And I believe this is what needs to be changed. And how together we can find solutions that are sustainable, but also what has been said today, that we need to have a systemic approach. We cannot look at the sectors independent, but they need to be here heard, and they need to work in an integrated and a cross-cutting manner. And to me, this will take from here. We are talking about private finance, but one of the speakers referred to the need to have a public finance. And think that we have 500 billion every year going to subsidies that are not climate smart, that are not improving or protecting the environment. If we bring all those resources, which is coming from the private sector, I am sure we can make it. And this is why I am completely in agreement with the representative of Thailand. We need partnership, and we need cooperation, and we need coordination. We cannot do the same. We need to see where are the gaps and where we need to contribute. I wanted to thank all of you here to say that FAO is working with Jeff, is working with the Green Climate Fund. We are working with the World Bank and other partners to support the countries to access to those resources. Sometimes it's not easy to prepare a project, to formulate a project. The countries, they don't have the resources, they don't have the data required. And this is why we need to work together to support the countries, particularly the least developing countries, to access to those resources. And on the other side, maybe the financing institution needs to, I know that you need to protect the money, where you put the money, and to be sure that you have a return from the investment. But how we can have more flexibility, that the countries can have easy access to those resources. And to me is another challenge we have and we need to work together. Just to say that count on FAO, we are here to support you. We are here to partner with our institutional finances, but let's come to COP28 to say all of us loud and clear that we have increased the financial resources allocated to agri-food system. I'm not talking about agriculture, let's talk about the value chain, how we have increased the resources to agri-food system and how we have been able maybe to transform our agri-food system. Thank you all the panelists for being here. Thank you all the participants, and thank you Nadine for facilitating the event. Thank you.